Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers. Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Azumullah ujurana wa ujurakum bimusabina bi Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. In this series, we are exploring the life and legacy of one of the most prominent figures in the movement of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, that is to say, Hazrat Zaynab, peace be upon her, the one who became known as the voice of the message of Karbala after the martyrdom of the Imam. We are honored to be joining you today from the holy city of An-Najaf al-Ashraf, and in particular from the sacred site of Masjid al-Hanana, a mosque which has considerable significance in our history, but in particular a place where the captives were brought, the women, the children, Sayyida Zaynab, peace be upon her, Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam, where they were brought on their way from Karbala to Kufa. And this is one of the places where the sacred head of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam was set to rest for a while. And for these reasons, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam used to pray extra prayers here, just out of respect for the sanctity of the personalities who had come to this site. In the previous episodes, we were exploring the various tools, the various means, the various weapons, if you will, that Sayyida Zaynab alayhi salam had at her disposal to fight back against the enemy, to defend the survivors, to defend the Imam, to defend herself, and ultimately to emerge victorious. Hazrat Zaynab, peace be upon her, did not have a sword. She did not have a sword, she did not have a shield, she did not have a gun. What did she have to fight with against these vicious enemies? In the previous episodes, we saw how she fought with her faith, how she fought with her words, with her eloquence, how she fought with her dignity. And in this episode, we will see how she fought with another very powerful thing. And like the others, this is something that you and I also have access to, and that is the truth. One of the weapons of Sayyida Zaynab, salamullahi alayha, that she had was the truth. One of the characteristics that she brought with her on this journey to Karbala and beyond was the capacity to speak the truth as it was. And we all know that the truth itself is extremely powerful. This indeed is one of the messages of the book of Allah Ta'ala, where He speaks, Allah Ta'ala speaks about the victory of truth over falsehood. For instance, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَقُلْ جَاءَ الْحَقُّ وَزَهَقَ الْبَاطِلُ. Truth has come and falsehood has perished. إِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ كَانَ زَهُوقًا. What is the nature of falsehood? Falsehood is always withering away and perishing and disappearing. It is the truth that shall remain, even if for some time it seems that falsehood might have the upper hand. This indeed was one of the messages of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And we see that throughout the journey of Sayyida Zaynab, peace be upon her, her ability to simply speak the truth and appeal to people through the truth moved them in a great manner, beginning on the day of Ashura, when she moved the enemy to tears simply by speaking the truth of what had happened, by speaking the truth of the one whom they had killed. On the way to Kufa, when Sayyida Zaynab salamullahi alayha addressed the people. And we see the power of the truth in her speech in Kufa, when she says to the people of Kufa that they have committed a great crime, that they have done something which is unspeakable. They have violated the sanctity of someone who is protected before Allah Ta'ala. She tells the people of Kufa that you're like someone who has unspun the thread that they have woved, like a woman who spins thread and then unravels it. They went, they offered their allegiance to the Imam alayhi salam, they begged him to come there, and then they betrayed him, they abandoned him, and they left him to be slaughtered. She tells the people of Kufa that they are destined for eternal chastisement before Allah Ta'ala. This is a very heavy statement. This is a very heavy assertion. I, Amina, cannot tell someone you are going to hell. I cannot say you are going to heaven or you are going to hell. But Sayyida Zaynab salamullahi alayha, she had the knowledge and the insight and the faith and the background to be able to tell this to these people in no uncertain terms. And they accepted it. They understood that what she was saying was correct. And she told the people of Kufa that they were going to suffer shame and indignity and humiliation for what they had done. So she was very direct in her speech. She did not mince words. She did not avoid the subject. And as we were discussing last time, there was no opposition to what she said. The people accepted it. No one argued. No one complained. But that was not the last time in Kufa that her ability, alayha salam, to speak the truth would shine forth. Because after Sayyida Zaynab, peace be upon her, spoke to the people of Kufa, then Ibn Ziyad had the prisoners, had the captives brought in before him, as if it is some sort of celebration, a bit like Yazid had, a bit on a lesser scale, of course, than Yazid did in Syria. But nonetheless, to try to show that they have been overcome, they have been overwhelmed, and they have been humiliated. Interestingly, it's related in some history books, and these are by Sunni historians, Ibn Hajar, Ibn Asqalani. So these are not even necessarily coming from Shi'i narrations. It's related that when the sacred head of the Imam alayhi salam was brought into the palace of Ibn Ziyad, that the walls themselves began to bleed, that blood began to flow from the walls. And this should not at all be surprising, because Ashura was a day on which the heavens themselves rained blood, according to what is narrated. And then it's related that, as a matter of fact, the mansion of Ibn Ziyad caught fire and he began to flee, just like on the night after Ashura, the women were fleeing from tent to tent because the enemies were burning the tents down. So Ibn Ziyad runs away from the fire when all of a sudden a voice was heard throughout the mansion, and everyone heard this, it was not just him. The voice was calling out, "Where are you running to? If you run away from the fire in this world, you will not be able to run away from it in the next." And yet still, Ibn Ziyad did not take heed. He had these captives brought before him. He had the severed head of the Imam alayhi salam brought before him. And like Yazid, he began to disrespect it. He began to poke it. He began to play around with it. There was an elderly companion there, Zayd ibn Arqam. He sees what Ibn Ziyad is doing, and he said, this is what comes to his mind, he said, "I saw the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa ala kissing that very face. I saw him showing love towards his grandson. And now this is what you're doing to him?" Ibn Ziyad was furious. He thought that perhaps he had ought to kill this companion, but instead he said, "It's only because you're old, you've lost your mind, you're not thinking clearly, that I'm going to let you go." And so this companion said to Zayd, like Sayyida Zaynab salamullahi alayha, he was very direct, that, "Oh, people of Kufa, you've allowed someone like this, you've allowed the worst of you to become your leader, and you have killed the best among you. And that there should be no humiliation like this." And then he left. And so Ibn Ziyad then looked towards Sayyida Zaynab salamullahi alayha, and he asked her this famous question. He said, "How do you see what Allah has done to your brother Hussein?" And of course, if any of us were in her situation, we might respond to this in many different ways. But the response of Sayyida Zaynab, peace be upon her, has lasted throughout the time. It's remembered throughout time because of how beautiful it is, because of the depth of faith it shows, because of the depth of understanding that it shows when she says back to Ibn Ziyad, "Ma ra'aytu illa jamilan." I have not seen anything but beauty in what has unfolded in Karbala, despite the difficulty, despite the suffering. And these are people who gladly gave their lives in the way of Allah Ta'ala, who were honored with martyrdom. It elevated their status. Allah Ta'ala has granted the former ones who came before us with happiness and with mercy, and He has granted these individuals with martyrdom and meeting Him in that way. Ibn Ziyad was not pleased with the way he was going, and he saw that there was a male survivor among them, Ali ibn al-Hussein, peace be upon both of them. And he says to his commanders, "I thought you killed all of the sons of al-Hussein. What is this one doing here?" And so he threatened to kill al-Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam. So once again, the Imam's life is under threat. Zaynab salamullahi alayha has been tasked with the responsibility of keeping him alive. And so she again stands in front of her brother, she embraces him, and she says, again, as she had said before, if you want to kill him, you have to kill me first. I am not going to let you kill him without killing me. And the Imam alayhi salam, he also said that Allah takes the souls of the people when it's time to die, when He wills. Ibn Ziyad looked at that. He saw the way Al-Imam Sajjad alayhi salam was speaking. He saw the way Hazrat Zaynab alayhi salam was speaking. And there was no way he could argue back against it. As angry as he was, there was no way he could argue against what they were doing, what they were saying. And so he let them go. He just said, subhanAllah, what amazing blood ties of kinship they have, that this lady wants to be killed with her nephew. He didn't know what to do with them, so he put them in prison for a while to try to silence them. And even then, Sayyida Zaynab alayhi salam, she made a point. She insisted that no one should look after us in prison except a woman who has known captivity, except a woman who has known enslavement, either a slave girl or a freed slave, or a walad, a woman who has born a child who was once a slave. Because these are the people who would understand the situation that we have been put in. And in this way, she called attention to their plight. And so despite all of the efforts of the enemies to silence their voices, to silence the message of Al-Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, instead people began to recognize more and more what had happened. And it is not an exaggeration to say that the words of Sayyida Zaynab, peace be upon her, on that day led to a revolution in Kufa. Indeed, the impact was nearly immediate. Many of the people wanted to go out right away and to try to take justice on the killers of Al-Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. These are the ones who would become known as the Tawwabun. And although they delayed their movement for some time, they didn't go out right away. Nonetheless, they would go out in a very heart-rending fashion, begging forgiveness from Allah, begging forgiveness from the Imam alayhi salam. And it would be clear that they genuinely wanted to repent and make up for what they did, even though, of course, there's no way they could truly make up for it. Her words would ultimately lead to the uprising and the movement of Al-Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, where he would actually be the one to take justice against the killers of Al-Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. And in addition to that, after Yazid met his maker and left this world, Ibn Ziyad himself would be forced to flee before he too met justice at the hands of Al-Mukhtar. And so, although the speech of Sayyida Zaynab alayhi salam was short, it was very powerful. It was very effective. It left an undeniable mark on history. And one of the main reasons for that was simply that she spoke the truth. وآخر دعوانا عن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.